Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I am very fired up for this panel. As you know, I've been a category developer and a keen watcher of how new categories get adopted because of disruptive technology. I mean, I grew up in the age of multi-tenant cloud, which is no longer that exciting. I think AI has replaced that. VCs, that's really all they're investing in these days. And so it's exciting that AI has the same potential to create entirely new categories of software. So that's my interest involved here. Of course, I've been involved in the MarTech SaaS category and have seen that develop and now becoming mature. So anyway, that's my keen interest in it. Enterprise adoption of AI, that really does lead the way in terms of seeing what are companies adopting, why are they adopting it, what are the challenges that they're having, how they are getting over those challenges. So I can't wait to learn from my co-panelists today in terms of where they are placing bets, where they're seeing their customers place bets.
Amazing. Let's do a quick round of introductions. Caitlin, let's start with you.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Clark-Zigmond, marketing executive, most recently with Intel, leading software marketing globally around trust AI and performance optimization.
Always great featuring you. Alexa.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here. I'm Alexa. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Focus. So we're a sales AI platform, primarily help with account research and prospecting. So excited to be here.
Great to have you here. Anastasia.
Hi, everyone. Anastasia Pavlova. I'm founder and CMO at Bold GTM, a revenue and go-to-market consultancy. Prior to that, I was in cybersecurity at OneLogin, at Marketo. Mark, I've used Eloqua, and I used your Influitive platform many times. So if we have time to dive into MarTech evolution, that would be very interesting. So really happy to be here.
Definitely will. Dale.
Dale Harrison. So I work as a strategic marketing consultant, largely in the biotech area, but increasingly in SaaS and other technology areas as well.
Great having you here. And last but not least, Randy.
Hi, everybody. Randy Wooten, so CEO of a company called Maxio, which does billing, invoicing, RevRec for B2B SaaS companies. This was my third gig as CEO. First one, though, back in 2015, was a first-gen AI company called Rocket Fuel, where we had our own servers, we were cranking our own models. It was a whole different world before Gen AI. So I've been watching the evolution of AI and just been totally blown away by how much traction it's gotten over the last 2 years and everybody thinking about the different use cases. So excited to explore more today.
Great having you here. Mark, it's your stage, your hour.
Yeah,
take it away.
Let's rock and roll here. So before I thought we would get into what technologies we're adopting, how we're making our teams more competitive and whatnot. I want to just take a step back. As all of you have been around for a while and have seen technologies evolve. How do you think about AI as technologies for business? Is this kind of like the way the web or the way that mobile was adopted, or is this something different? And I think that might set the stage for where and why we're placing the bets that we are.
I don't know if it's going to be all that different. If you think about where we've come from, things like from a networking perspective, you talked about mobile. While 4G took almost 10 years to fully adopt, 5G is definitely going faster, but it's still a length of time. And I think there's going to be this kind of slow progression, and there's going to be kind of that sort of rocket, and I think we had the advertising of the rocket ship of AI, in 2020, 2024, but I think it really is going to come a little bit later once, for previous conversations, the data sets, businesses start really unpacking what they have within their own companies and then start leveraging these tools, as well as the tools starting to integrate AI into them and actually making, it easier to get value, out of the different work, that each tool does, et cetera. So I think it's going to, sort of have that little bit of that slow kind of roll and then sort of that increase, just like we saw with the internet for those of us who, watched that happen.
Right. Any other thoughts on
I think there are multiple camps. There's certainly skeptics that have seen it all and been through previous periods of disruption. And there's definitely a lot of hype. And the skeptics think that this is just another one of those bubbles with little substance. And I think there are also plenty of younger companies which are AI first companies, and so and that is very interesting to watch, because when young founders have an opportunity to build a company on AI, delivering AI services, and really taking advantage of all the opportunities AI can offer, with insane valuations, some of them, it certainly brings a different perspective. So I'd like to, because I work with both camps and it's interesting to watch, but I'm fully supportive of the AI first companies and newcomers to the space.
For sure, yeah, and they both camps may be right. I mean, I remember when Amazon.com went down 97% in terms of market value. Cisco, which was the darling of that age, has still not got to its former value. That said, the people who said the internet changes everything were right. It did change everything.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of hype. There are a lot of companies that are not going to make it. And I think you're right about the AI first is interesting, right? I think those are the ones where they have a chance for real value to be made. So, and that might be the thing that's interesting to get into later is what is overhyped and where is the real staying power? Where's the real lasting value going to be, particularly with enterprise adoption? I think is interesting.
Well,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I jump in with sort of a dissenting opinion here. I think the question is making an irrelevant comparison, because everything you've talked about, internet, web, mobile, 5G, Cisco, Amazon, these are fundamentally distribution technologies. And AI is not a distribution technology. The way that it integrates into companies and businesses and operations is going to function at a deeply fundamentally different way, with very different adoption dynamics than what you get from, a 10x, 100x, 1000x improvement in distribution. Companies are always able to absorb better distribution in ways that are not disruptive to the organization. If we go back 60 years ago, with the invention of containerized cargo, which is a very old school technology, but it radically altered how manufacturing is done, how your ability to ship across the oceans, and but at the end of the day, the manufacturers were still building things with parts. It's just that the parts came from further and further away, and so it was not fundamentally disruptive to the organizational structure of the company. And I think the challenge with AI is that you're asking it to do something that is really, extremely disruptive organizationally, but also I think it's something that is not well thought through, because I think a lot of people are making these kind of false comparisons with what are essentially distribution technologies, as opposed to the kind of decision engine technology that comes with AI. And to give a little bit of perspective, early in my career, I was an AI developer. So I was very, very involved in an earlier generation of AI products. And so a lot of this was around natural language processing, expert systems. Those were the two main areas that I worked in. And a lot of this was frontline deployment in Fortune 100 companies. And just to give you a specific example, and I think this very, very directly ties in with sort of where we are today with the current generation of AI. So I had a project with, a major, Fortune 50 insurance company. And the goal at the time was to build an expert system that would replace the thousands of claims processors they had that were doing homeowners insurance claims processing. And I remember at the time meeting with senior executives, and someone made some comment about, a lot of these people don't even have high school degrees. No one, at most they'll have a couple of years of community college. Monkeys could do this job. And it turns out monkeys couldn't do the job, and neither could AI. And 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 what you saw was that there was an extremely deep level of intuitive understanding on the part of those claims processors, even if they didn't have a lot of education, that allowed them to see subtleties that could not be captured, with the AI technology. And and so in the end, what we ended up with was a tool that was essentially an accelerator of the efficiency of the existing claims processors rather than a replacement for the claims processors. So, it was like, a more efficient stapler. And, but the upper limit of the value of that was a lot smaller than what people were imagining, because senior leadership at the time was imagining laying off thousands and thousands of people and replacing it with a bunch of software. And I think you see the same kind of delusional thinking today. And I think it's gonna crash against the same set of rocks that we did in the prior generation of AI.
Okay, so you're saying, so if AI is not distribution technology, what actually is it?
Decision technology.
Decision technology. I see.
And why do we have humans in companies? Why do we not have a Fortune 500 company with 5 employees? Because you need humans. And why do you need humans? It's not just to lift things. It's to make decisions. It's to think about the world, some tiny narrow aspect of that world, process that information and make decisions. And the promise of AI 30 years ago and the promise of AI today is the same, which is you can somehow replace these expensive humans with really cheap machines, and and get the same sort of decision making. And and this is the argument that I make, is that we are a century away from having software be able to do that level of decision making that's going to allow massive replacement of the sort of human decision making that you see on the factory floor, that you see in big processing groups, but within marketing groups. There's a lot of subtle, deep understanding of what works and doesn't work that's locked up inside people's heads. And companies are very, very good at nurturing, that human capital. And I think what you're going to see is that, the current generation of AI technology is just going to be a shadow of what it needs to be to even begin to replace that sort of human capital.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's really interesting. It's a good segue. To the next question really is around adoption. So what is the main value that you are seeking from the adoption of AI in your companies?
I think for, what I'm seeing and where CXOs have opportunities in 2025 and sort of bringing it down to what are we doing today, which isn't asking AI to make the decision. It's asking AI to help bring the data about to help us make the decision. So, as Microsoft would tell you, that whole co-pilot, not the pilot, but you're a co-pilot in this world. And so I think some of the areas where I see is really around predictive analytics, using AI to analyze historical data, really, weaponizing the information and data sets already in existence within an organization. So yes, you have this human capital. Yes, you have tribal knowledge, but you have tons of data from finance to marketing to sales plays to partner relationships to other things that you really could be leveraging if you could only remember, and each human brain can only remember, so much. So I think that's one area that AI is going to be helpful. Two is really around personalization from a marketing perspective, really allowing, cool tools. I mean, some of them are, for content generation, we've talked a lot about that, but how do you personalize not just the content, but the journeys and maximize the interaction points that we have with our customers? And I think we saw in this last panel where, how SDRs are, you can use less of them, but they're becoming more productive. And so how can we take personalization to do that? I think automation of repetitive tasks is a third area that I think is really going to be helpful, where AI can take burden off and bring answers to people. And then fourth is really data-driven insights. So, how do you look at the past performance of the campaigns, the gaps in, attribution or other things that we've been talking about? How do we think about the marketing, the funnel, the driving to delight, the prioritization of next features on a roadmap, et cetera, and using data within the organization or within the marketplace to help us understand how to guide our businesses forward. And then on AI integration as a whole, I think we have to continue to work on the side as experiments, to figure out where best to integrate AI into our businesses within marketing or sales or product development. There's lots of different places, but I think it's not a lift and shift. It's going to be test and learn. And not only because we want the AI to perform well, but we have a lot of learning for our human companions in this journey around, prompts, but, being good at prompts, being good at data sets, looking at how it's clean, how to understand hallucinations, and, so on and so forth, whereby I think we're going to take a lot of people along for this journey. And so while it might not be a distribution, it's a data and information opportunity that businesses can definitely leverage to accelerate revenue and opportunity for them. And AI should help make that a little bit easier. We don't use washboards anymore. We use washing machines. And, yes, you can still clean your clothes that way, but no, you don't want to. So let's think a little bit about what I see around some, 5 areas where we can take advantage of that from a CXO perspective that doesn't make the decision for us, but makes the decisions easier.
It's great.
So,
Thanks.
I'd love to just build on that a little bit. And splitting it into two. One is workflow automation. I think that there is going to be, even in this year, the VCs and PE-backed companies are going to need to show the gain from AI in their efficiency, scale, and quality of delivery. And I've seen different slides going around amongst my fellow CEOs that next year people are expecting like 30%. So that you can show that you can scale your organization at 30% using the available AI tools out there for like Zendesk service, et cetera. So I think it fundamentally changes the way you think about operating and delivering and engaging. The other piece, I think both Dale, you and Caitlin, sort of makes me think of AI as augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence. And that was the big aha we had when we were Rocket Fuel back in 2015, and people were afraid of AI displacing them from their jobs, and that what would they do next? It was the Jetsons versus the Terminator type construct. The boom and the doom, I think, is what they describe it today. And I do think that's the fundamental shift. And I think, Dale, you put your finger on the button in terms of it's not about workflow automation. It is about rethinking how you even approach work. That's the thing that is mind-boggling for me, is that in every single interaction, there's this step of, oh, should I be playing with ChatGPT for this email, for this, announcement, for this press release, for this whatever. I think, Caitlin, that over time, the interfaces become better. So you don't even need to really, you need to know about prompt engineering now, but it's just going to get better and better in the next 12 to 18 months. You're not going to even need to even know the concept of prompt engineering. It's just going to be a more human interaction. But I do think, how do you relate with something all the time in every conversation that you're having in your work life, obviously, but does it become part of your personal life as well? Constant, like the new AI in the new iPhone 16, what do they call it? Apple Intelligence or something like that? Ongoing, all the time, ever present, this companion or augmented intelligence, and learning how to take advantage of it so you can move quicker, come up with better ideas. And make a bigger impact.
Well,
Huh.
and I think there's a valuable lesson, historical lesson from 2 centuries ago that people should consider. So if we go back slightly more than 2 centuries ago, the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, you needed to dig a ditch. It took a lot of humans with shovels and not a lot of brain power. And when the early steam powered tools like the steam excavators started to come into practice or into usage in the early mid 1800s, you had a lot of kind of moral panic around that machines and automation will basically put all of the labor, the proletariat out of work. And in fact, if you look at the foundations of Karl Marx's work in the 1840s, it is entirely predicated on the fact that machines will disemploy 90% of the population, and this will inevitably lead to revolution. And of course, what we see is that that's not what happened. And and in the end, the machines still required a human to run them, and it still required other people to decide where the ditch needed to be dug and when the ditch digging was done with. This is the higher level decision making. And I think that in many ways, the current generation of AI is essentially an automated steam shovel. And it's going to interact with the workforce and with organizations in a similar way to how, the early introduction of those sorts of machines in, 2 centuries ago, interacted. Now, at the same time, if we look over the last 2 centuries, it profoundly altered society. And one of the ways it profoundly altered society is that it upscaled the value of labor. And so you went from 90% of the population being impoverished to most of the population in the Western world being quite wealthy, because of the machines and because of the automation. And so I think you're going to see those sort of changes. But the other thing to keep in mind is it took more than a century for that to really percolate through both popular culture and organizational culture, for companies to really, another example was the introduction of electricity. It took 60 years for factories to figure out how to use electricity. The idea that you don't have, sort of one big giant motor, you have a lot of small motors on each individual machine. That took 3 generations to really work out between the 1880s up to the 1930s. And so I think the timelines on this stuff is multi-generational, is very, very long.
But
And
hasn't though in our modern age? I mean, the adoption curves are so much faster. Like what used to took decades, now you see
but they're
take
not
2
that
or
much
3 years.
faster. That is simply a false belief. If you go back and you look at the rate of the adoption of new technology from basically the beginning of the age of coal, 1820 or so, all the way through the 20th century, it was a blistering pace of adoption of new technology. Again, you look 1875, telephone is invented. By 1885, there are millions of telephones and millions of, because there was huge rapid adoption, but it still took another 50 years for the telephone to really become what we think of today as the telephone. So I think the pace of innovation has not picked up. This is sort of a kind of the current generation being egotistical about how better they are, different they are from the past. But you go back and you look decade by decade over the last 2 centuries, and we've gone through just a blistering pace of innovation and adoption of new technology, and there's nothing that's really speeding this up. Again, think about the internet. I have personally been on the internet since 1987. It took 30 years for the internet to sort of become the ubiquitous distribution mechanism after it was available. So these are very, very long lead time changes because they represent cultural and societal changes that basically require a multi-generational shift to be able to really achieve.
Right. And to your prior point, AI technologies are actually maybe even more challenging for companies to adopt than some of
Vastly
the.
more.
Yeah. So that's a segue to the next question then, is around what are you doing first, what are the barriers to adoption in your companies? We've heard a little bit on the human element of that. What are the barriers, and then what are you doing to use Dale's words, to culturally shift your companies to better adopt these technologies? I know somebody who's like the AI czar, and it's a mid-sized manufacturer, and that's her job. Her job is to help people think differently about their work and to think about using AI. But curious about your companies and what you're doing and what your customers are doing as well in order to speed adoption of these ideas and technologies.
I can hop in here. Maybe before I jump into adoption, I can also, Dale, I am the building an AI first company, so I have about every opposite opinion to what you just said. So I think we could have some good spicy debate here. But I mean, so from my perspective, it's not years away. It's happening right now. And I agree with you that maybe AI can't be the full decision maker right now. But what I am seeing it do is do the first level of research and decision making far better than a junior analyst or a junior SDR or whatever field you're in, to then streamline the decision making process for folks later. So to me, I think AI is everywhere. And the beautiful thing is, with adoption, with the internet, you had to learn something new. But with AI, it's embedded into existing workflows, and eventually you won't even know you're using AI. You just have this like co-pilot friend that is telling you what to do. So Dale, we can go on and on about this, but I like the different opinions. But for us, in terms of adoption, so we are a AI account research and prospecting tool. And so when I see our companies adopt POCUS or other companies, someone mentioned there's like an AI czar in another company. We see that a lot. We see AI tiger teams, or there's kind of a project manager of AI. And what they're doing is scoping out what are the pains that we feel in our organization that we think can be improved with AI. And they're saying, hey, we're going to take this small line of business, small team, or we're going to take 10 different users, or we're going to take this one use case, and we're going to test this out. And can we hit our goals? Can we make people smarter? Can we make them move faster? Can we remove the tedious work? Can we improve efficiency? If yes, scale it to the rest of the org. If no, that's not something that works for us right now. The AI is not good enough. We're not ready for it, whatever that looks like. So I've already seen this happening a ton with our customers. I'll also acknowledge we sell to other tech companies. So I think I'm probably in a bubble of folks that are very forward thinkers in AI and folks that are kind of waking up, eating, sleeping, breathing, and then going to bed thinking about AI. So there is more willingness to adopt versus kind of more traditional companies. I could imagine it would be a bit slower.
I would add that, completely agree with you, Alexa. And I think that we see a lot of the experimentation. I think if we back up even before we get to AI, I think this was already starting with what you've seen in sales and marketing and how the whole go-to-market engine is coming together. But it's really about the democratization of data. So your CDPs, the databases, how do you democratize the information that's available? Because even before AI, it was clear that in order to understand, for product to know what features, for marketing to know what campaigns, for sales to know who to go after and talk to customer success, understand how to onboard and keep and retain a customer, we had to start bringing all the different data points that each of the teams was collecting into a place where we could all leverage and utilize it. Now, AI then becomes this great opportunity to accelerate those answers and integrate them and bring them to each of the teams and collectively to the CEO on how to then move the business, forward. So I would say, I think what we see even in large enterprises who are still slow to adopt, that they've already started to make the motions on, chief data officers and other things that were, even precursoring the explosion of AI. We're already starting to move because the amount of data that was coming into the business that was needing to be processed had grown exponentially. And in order to make any use of it, besides store it, we needed to start to do something. I think so that's just one, one area, but I think the data democratization, just generally speaking, is a really key component that will facilitate a lot of, AI transformation going forward.
Yeah, to your point, I think that before you have an AI strategy, you have to have a data strategy, especially for companies that aren't AI first. And I think we found this in our own journey at Maxio, bringing two companies together. The way that the data was structured, we couldn't put an intelligence layer on top. And I remember being at Salesforce, you guys were chatting about that before I showed up, and they basically had to rip everything back down to bare metal and start over to be able to layer in Einstein as a decision layer. And so I do think companies have to get real about their data and understand where it is, how it's structured, how they're going to aggregate it, how they're going to put a data pipe in, how they're going to dump it down to a data lake. And that's a multi-year journey, again, for people that aren't AI first. I think the companies that are getting born today are thinking like vector databases. That's radically different than what we were using before. And I do think people underestimate how hard it is to put the data. Now, the AI may advance to a level where it doesn't need to have this much structure in the databases right now in the data lakes, but currently, really, really hard.
So one thing to throw out, the last period of an explosion of AI first companies was 30 years ago. 30 years is exactly the right amount of time for everyone to completely forget why things failed in the past. And what I'm seeing is the current generation of AI first companies are making precisely the same mistake that doomed the prior generation 30 years ago. And they're completely oblivious to it. And the problem is this. First of all, it's a decision engine. The thing with decisions is they're not always right. And so you've got in a variety of different contexts, you're going to have false positive and false negative signals coming out of the decision engine. If you do not validate and measure and understand what your rate of false positive and false negative signals are out of the decision engine, it will fail. Because what will happen is you may feel like it's doing great, but when you put this in the hands of 10,000 customers, they're going to intuitively know that there's a lot of BS here, that is just not doing what was promised, and the products will be abandoned. And this is what happened 30 years ago. And this is why you had this entire, what was referred to as, especially in academia, as the AI winter, where you went through a period of time where you had thousands of companies collapse. And and nothing that was AI related could get funded, and I see the exact same mistakes being made again because people do not understand how to evaluate a decision engine and how to, and so it feels good, and I'll give you a very specific example. I'm a pretty heavy user of ChatGPT-4. It is probably 80% incorrect. You literally have to know the right answer to be able to evaluate the answer you give it. And I use it in 3 or 4 key areas. I do market research. I use it as a reference tool for writing articles. I use it as an assistant to help me doing complex statistical analysis. And I use it to write short to medium blocks of Python code. So if I need to do like a Monte Carlo simulation, I'll set up I'll describe the simulation. Easily 80% of what it gives me is completely wrong. Now it's close enough that I can fix it. So I can fix the Python code. I can fix the errors it's giving me in terms of the statistical analysis and then do it correctly myself. But it's because I have a lot of expertise. But one of the things that people don't understand, and again, realize ChatGPT is just one incarnation, but a lot of this applies to a lot of the machine learning stuff out there as well. It is not the Oracle of Delphi channeling the wisdom of the gods. It is simply a summarization engine. It takes its inputs from, and again, if you look at ChatGPT specifically or the LLMs, it ingests data from the internet. The problem is most of the data on the internet is garbage. And so what's going to come out, is a lot of garbage. And the explanation I give is it's like, if I'm making sausages and I have 20 chops, but one of the chops is bad, but I throw it into the mix anyway. So are the sausages that come out 5% bad or 100% bad? And the answer is they're 100% bad. And this is the core problem that I'm seeing right now in my own usage of LLMs, that you really have to know the answer because no one is checking it. And and again, this goes back to the false positive, false negative checking on the quality of the decisions and whether or not this represents an improvement over the human decision making. And and I think we're going to enter a second AI winter because the existing AI first companies completely fail to understand what's going to kill them.
Well, thank goodness we will still have jobs and can't rely on AI only, and AI will hopefully just augment what we do. That's why we are the experts. But I wanted to actually go back to the to Mark's original question about AI adoption, kind of barriers to adoption, and clearly many of you have referenced the data issues, garbage in, garbage out. We all know that. So that's one of the biggest areas many companies are struggling with. And I think on the adoption curve, again, the bigger the company, the more difficult it is for them to integrate AI into their existing processes because they're so complex. Whereas for AI natives, like for Alexa's company, they can just build some of these processes from scratch and use the latest and greatest tools. Some of the best practices for AI adoption, so Mark mentioned an AI czar. I've seen companies form cross-functional committees, actually, right? So whether there is a czar at the top or whether they report to the CMO or CEO or chief AI officer at some companies, I mean, it really depends on the size and complexity of the organization. But the first step in the process, I think, is really to define AI use cases within the organization, and that's a cross-functional effort because there's so many. We all know marketing use cases. There's plenty of sales or BDR, SDR related use cases, research and development, coding. I mean, those are all very important ones. But there's plenty in HR or legal, as we know. So there's so many processes that can be automated and get productivity gains and improvements, and very often those functions are not at the table of the discussion. So it is, I think, the progressive companies are really thinking about this deeply and form these cross-functional committees and define and prioritize use cases for different internal functions. I also see a disparity between, the focus of many technology companies are really on how they can integrate AI into their products and platforms and services. And they think less about how they can upskill their internal workforce and how they can really execute on the internal use cases.
It's actually, it's an awesome segue into what I really wanted to get into next, which is, I think we've been using these technologies to improve productivity, some cases, reduce costs, improve productivity and whatnot. I mean, what I get excited about is when we can use technologies to increase our competitiveness and especially improve the experience and value for customers. And I think to your point about cross-functional, like you can't do that with just one siloed function. I think that requires a bit of a rethink. And I'd love to hear from you guys in terms of what are you doing? What are your customers doing? What are you hearing about in terms of using these technologies to fundamentally improve the value proposition for our customers, the experience that they get with us and the value they get from us?
Well, and I can start by saying that some of my clients we do customer research with the help of AI, and so that really improves. I mean, it's a basic use case, but we can do it so much better and faster. It's from whether we're creating surveys to analyzing the data that comes in, or whether it's transcription of of conversations, and then analysis of customer conversation or sentiment analysis. I mean, these are the kind of fundamental use cases where AI brings enormous benefits. And then we can, go deeper and use our human touch and follow up on those conversations, and then really incorporate the fundamental insights from the research in our roadmaps or service offerings.
So,
Cool.
Anastasia, I think that's an absolutely perfect use case for the current generation, especially with the LLMs.
Agreed.
Where you have direct control over the input data that the model ingests, which then gives you some certainty over the kinds of responses that are going to come out of the model. And that is, I don't think you could get a better use case. But there's a slightly adjacent use case that I think is one of the most absurd things happening in marketing right now, which is the concept of the synthetic audience. And there's a very high profile company that is pushing this idea, and it's utterly absurd. And here's why it's absurd. These engines are able to summarize data that it ingested, nothing else. And so, and where does the data come from? It either comes from your own proprietary data that you ingested into it, or in most cases, it's coming from the internet. And this idea of synthetic audience is, we're going to take a generalized engine, suck all the stuff from the internet. Well, the question is, what's in the ingested data? And the answer is, for every sentence that's written by an actual customer of a given product, there are probably 10,000 sentences written by marketers trying to sell the product. And so what you get is an echo chamber of what marketers think customers want, not a reflection of what customers want. And yet what comes out of it feels very authentic. But what you really are listening to is essentially just an echo chamber of what, of what other people just like you think that the customer is thinking, not what the customer is thinking. And it's this, again, it's this inability to understand where the data came from, what's actually being processed, that leads people to have these kind of a magical thinking around what comes out. And, one of the things that one of the phrases that I use for LLMs is that in their current state, they are essentially algorithmic mansplaining engines that they have this kind of superficial knowledge. They're very confident in their answers. They always sound smooth, but about 50% of it is bullshit. And, and so it's like we've taken mansplaining and we've been able to, fully automate it with several $100 billion worth of investment.
I think, I mean, I don't disagree with you at certain levels. I think that there's, I think you're seeing it, showing up in a number of different environments where it's, to your point, it's very distinct data sets and it's also user driven. So the example I would say is like consumer and retail. If I'm buying, this blue jacket and I like pinstripes and I'm wearing this, okay, and I purchase it, well, then what would go well with it? What would you like? What else is like this? So some of the consumer expectations, this personalized content, the next best action, some of those things where it's really driven off the behaviors of the user. What are they searching for? What did they purchase? What did they like about you? Where did they go next? So on and so forth. I think there's going to be a lot there because I think the personalization you're already seeing from a marketing perspective, obviously that people who are doing personalized journeys and other things are accelerating much faster from a sales and revenue perspective. I think the other one though is that it'll also allow, practically for businesses, and you're talking about efficiency, it's that the business benefit of really, reducing customer acquisition costs and some of that by really being able to target specific personas. Now you're right. If we're ingesting all of that, the internet is saying, and every marketer, But if we're really focused on who our buyers are, what our buyer journey looks like, who our personas are, one of the things we're already seeing, especially, in the space of, selling trust and security services, AI, performance optimization, we can go right after our specific personas on the things that we can truly target and how we can truly help people, and have our sales teams run plays that really focus on those. And it's not about boiling the ocean. It's about being very, targeted and looking at where's the sweet spot right now that we can focus on to get to results, and then keep moving. I think, that's an opportunity from a business perspective. And then I think from a personal perspective, whether you're using Claude or, Gemini or ChatGPT, they all have some different skill sets and things that they're better at, from images to video to content and so on and so forth. And I think we're going to, personally, as we use them, we're going to start to find, based on our focus areas, whether we're in science or pharma or business or whatever, that there's going to be certain ones that probably lend themselves to, sort of better outcomes. And I think that the co-pilot component of this is really around, things that we're talking about, at Intel around the AI PC. The whole idea isn't to ingest every single thing from the internet, is taking every single thing on your laptop, all the work that you do, the view and all the searches and the content that you're driving, and make it easier so you can say, what was that PowerPoint that had the blue grid, that I did in January, and then, have it go find that, instead of me going through file folders, looking, for all of that. So I think that there's, we're not, I don't think a lot of the businesses I talk to, no one's trying to have it make all the decisions and replace the humans. They're trying to figure out, how do I democratize, weaponize the data that I have, and how do I more quickly connect with my customers and what they need, and what can these tools do to accelerate that for me?
So one thing to throw in real quick is this. The AI debate, I think, is a subset of a larger debate around the use of models versus data. So, for instance, you talked about, relying on user personas, but the problem with most companies, those user personas, how do they come into existence? What data was ingested to produce the personas? The answer is a bunch of marketers sitting by themselves in a closed conference room, none of which have ever laid eyes on an actual real life breathing customer, imagining what they think those customers would want. And there you get the personas. Now, that's not true for every company, but that's broadly true within marketing. And so you basically have a model that's going to tell you stuff that's either irrelevant or wrong, because it is disconnected from the original source, the primary data source that contains the truth. And again, I think we have the same issue with, again, I'm speaking primarily with the LLMs. We have the same issue with the LLMs in that the data that gets ingested is largely disconnected from what we really want to know about the operational details of the real world. Now, again, I think there are exceptions. So, for instance, in certain consumer product categories where there is extensive amount of, say, product reviews, you've got the chance to have an abundance of input data that represents the actual voice of real users, of real buyers. But in most cases, almost all the data is the equivalent of a bunch of marketers sitting in a room trying to fantasize what they imagine customers want and look like, and producing persona documents that are typically absurd. And the thing I always say is, take your persona document and show it to the top 10, the 10 top best sales reps in your company, and count what percentage of them laugh out loud, because they actually spend all day long talking to these people, and I've never seen, or I've seldom seen, a persona document that survives the test of showing it to the sales team, because they are the ones that have that firsthand ground knowledge. And this is the problem with the LLMs, is we have to understand where the data is coming from. And again, to Anastasia's point, if you have complete control over the input data that's being ingested into the model, and you understand the provenance of that data, and you're comfortable with the fact that represents ground level data from the real world, you're going to get good results. But outside that use case, you are far more likely to get, results that are really disconnected from the sort of the ground level truth that we need to know to be able to do our jobs.
So we need
It's a
transparency.
fundamental difference around what revenue marketing is versus awareness marketing. So anyone who's in revenue marketing actually does talk to customers, but we can leave that for another
Well, but
debate.
that's exactly right. I mean, we need first of all transparency around what goes into the model, and to control for some of these biases, we need to really validate the whatever that synthetic research gives us, and talk to real customers and use that. So some companies don't have the patience, or investors don't have the patience to let marketers do their job. So we're all under pressure to deliver results tomorrow, if not yesterday.
But what comes out of the LLMs is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is what goes into them. And this is what no one's looking at. Everyone's gushing over the outputs, and no one's having serious conversations about the inputs.
Yeah, no,
transparency is important.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to a couple of points here. I mean, what the area that I'm really excited about is how AI might be used for to improve customer success, the customer experience and value, and we now may have the ability to ingest more customer data, like to invite customers to provide more information to us, which may also allow us to drive more value in terms of the insights that we can deliver. So I'm excited about that. I think that before this technology, I don't think you could do this unless you had an army of people. In fact, I know of a company that hired a whole bunch of people in China 20 years ago to slice and dice customer data and provide that to frontline customer success people so they could drive more insights for customers. That company was WebEx, and they did this in 2004. I was blown away by that. Now I think you have the ability maybe for AI to do more things like that, and to enhance the value that we can create by using customer data. But curious if any of you guys are looking at customer success, customer value, customer experience. I mean, what are anything that we're doing there to make AI customer facing?
I think a good, recent use case that I saw around AI and really helping improve customer experience and deliver value is Kroger. Kroger is processing, tons of data at all of their stores across the country, every purchaser, every digital shopping cart, every single purchase that is being made. And what they're doing is, just, whether it's them or you use, Whole Foods or whoever, what happens is that they look at all the analytics of what's going into carts, what's being scanned as people are purchasing, looking at buying behaviors, looking at the personas of those purchasers. Are they, because we sign up for our, points or coupons or gas, discounts, etc. They can see that we're 20 somethings, 30 somethings, 40 somethings. And what it's really doing is that it allows them to do cool things, like when you fill your cart and you want to go pick it up, or you're gonna, go and have it, delivered, you get cool stuff like, did you forget something? And it can say, you can remind that you buy guacamole every week, or that you do certain things. And when it can get that personal and make the discounts. And so instead of just offering a discount for coffee for, Maxwell House, if you're a Folgers drinker, or you like Starbucks, the espresso pods, your discount that it's going to give you is specific to things you buy. And so it can actually take the dollars it wants to spend on marketing, give you the discount in a way that really makes a difference to you. And that improves customer retention and brand loyalty. And so I think that's a really great example of, where a very large enterprise is leveraging AI to, really help connect and stay connected with its customers and bringing value, to them on a daily basis.
I think there are so many use cases on the customer success side, and companies initially really focusing about, okay, how can we reduce the churn, right? And that's just not the right focus, because in order to reduce churn, you need to understand what are the reasons for your churn, and that often is a result of poor adoption of your platform. So you really need to get your customers to understand how to use the features of your platform or your service. So there is a lot of education. And I think AI is just like a perfect tool that can be, again, tailored to your specific platform, to your customers. You can use it to micro segment your customer base and really point your expensive customer success resources to tier one enterprise biggest customers, and then use technology to really make it easier for your other customers to really get the most benefit and value out of your platform.
That's an awesome use case. Room for a couple more people to chime in before we sign off.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in. I mean, there's a lot of different use cases for AI and CS that I've seen. I can talk about our tool and then others. The AI where I think, Caitlin, you were talking about it, where you can kind of look at we sell to B2B, so look at past conversion rates, what have helped you either book a meeting or close a deal or prevent churn or drive expansion. That using all that data to then predict what other potential future customers or buyers could be in that bucket. That's a great use case. I actually think that's been around for like the data science element and predictive analytics is now quote unquote older AI. But I think the newer AI that's really what I've seen being super interesting is the summarizing of information and help CS teams prepare for a meeting, prepare for their deal, prepare for their upcoming executive business review. And I actually think that once you have all of your external data anywhere on the internet, looking at 10Ks or news articles or podcasts or LinkedIn posts, everything's available online now. And combining that with the internal data, so ingesting your emails and your call transcripts and all this information, you can really prep a CS person or a CS team or a support team, whatever that is, to do their job really, really well. And so again, not to always reject your opinions, Dale, but for us, what we see is that all of these insights are super powerful for go-to-market teams already. Because even if the data is not perfect, you look at what data they're looking at today anyway. And yeah, no data is perfect, but you're getting it faster and you're getting it smarter. And I remember Sam Altman said, like, if you're building an AI product and you can see a future where the AI gets smarter week over week, then that is a good product to be building and investing in. And so you can already see how much stronger the AI has gone in a year. That is just going to, pick up the pace of acceleration of getting smarter every week, month, and year. And so I'm very optimistic about that.
But Alexa, I think you raise a good example of where if you're starting with the wrong model, all AI will do is to give you wrong answers faster. And oh, sorry. Okay.
Did your Alexa go off?
Yes. So specifically, there is a fundamental problem with being able to work backwards from success to come up with any valid predictions. And this is a major flaw that I'm seeing in the machine learning world. You cannot look at closed ones and produce a causal analysis to determine what you need to do in order to have more closed ones. That is fundamentally not how causal analysis works. This goes much deeper than the kind of surface level stuff that programmers that learn some machine learning are doing. And what you're seeing is these same failures to understand these sort of deep fundamental data principles that that have been infesting the machine learning world for 15 or 20 years now is now being carried over into the AI world. This is a fundamentally failed model for being able to do predictive analytics. And yet, with AI, you can now run this fundamentally failed model even faster with even more data than you could before with just machine learning. And so if you do not have, that deep understanding of what is and is not a valid model structure, especially if you're trying to do any sort of causal analysis, which any form of predictive analysis is causal analysis. All AI will do is to make the bad stuff happen faster and probably cheaper too, which will make it even more widespread. But so I think there are
Happy to chat offline. I think there's I know we're at time, but there's also bad prompt engineering equals bad outputs. And so there's ways to do good prompt engineering to get good outputs. So I can show you how our product does all the things that you just said is impossible.
Yeah. We'll continue this panel after. This is fascinating. Well, thank you. Thanks everybody for participation and for all the I'm sorry, we didn't get to the great questions from the audience. No, I think we answered the question of where's the chief of staff going in this age of AI, and I think we actually that function, and I think we actually answered a bunch of that in terms of adoption and other things. But thanks everyone, and look forward to continuing this conversation offline.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Mark. Last question, not from the audience, but if you were to build another startup this year, what people would you hire, if any? And what would be your tech stack? Mark?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were answering the next. I didn't realize that was for me. So I actually do have a startup in mind. I mean, one of the things that I'm excited about is product market fit in general. And I have a process that I go through with my clients in terms of very rapidly experimenting and iterating with different micro target markets, messaging, positioning, pricing, packaging, so that we can discover the next aspect of product market fit. And I think that's something that's really tailor-made for AI to put on steroids. I'm excited about a new class of AI that I've seen called problem decomposition algorithms, which is the ability to actually form hypotheses and break down a problem into pieces. And I could see the ability to use that in order to help companies get to product market fit faster. So that's my interest. If someone wants to steal my idea, go ahead.